is my 5th time recording this. I've been interrupted by my family and by myself. This is going to be a messy video. I will go on rants and they won't make sense because I'll forget what I'm saying. And third, I might get something inaccurate. But I'm trying my best. My pink bonnet, my pink cup, my pink pen. Let's get started. Starting off, Volume 2 of Stranger Things Season 5 was not horrible. I'll say it wasn't the worst at all. That episode that's rated the second lowest, there's episodes that I feel like were worse than that. I don't know. I love Stranger Things. It's one of my favorite shows. I have so much merch and Christmas presents. And honestly, Volume 2 did disappoint in many ways. But there was also many things we found out. The wormhole was really interesting. We got to see our king, Scott Clark, back. Steve and Dustin's fight was emotional, but it was great. It added more, hype than just long monologues. Max waking up and Lucas and Max getting back together, like reuniting, was great. And even Jonathan and Nancy's breakup scene, which I didn't interpret as a breakup, was still great because they know that the trauma bonded them together and that they're just together because they're just afraid of losing each other, and they love each other so much, but just not the way that most people would think. And even though that was a breakup scene, I thought they did it in the best way possible, and not breaking up just for her to get with Steve, which she acknowledges that Steve wants different things than her. So anyway, I didn't think it was horrible. The only thing that's really an issue is BYLER. This ship has taken control of my life, and probably in an unhealthy way too, but I stay awake thinking about it. It's this 27th right now. It came out 2 days ago, and I've been thinking about it nonstop. I genuinely can't function, which is not a good thing to say. But anyways, let's get started and talk about things that they still need to address about BYLER. This is mainly focused on BYLER, but I might go off topic, and that's just how it's gonna be. How BYLER can happen, how they can do it, why it's important, and things that they still need to address, which is how I'll start off. All these points I have written down are from people that I've watched other rants of. I've watched so many rants, and I decided to make one of my own, and I'm trying my best. These points are from the account Lesbian Mind Flayer, and also just what I've heard from other people too, because most people have similar points. And you'll probably hear these points again if you watch a different rant, but let's start off. The painting gate. It was never addressed in volume, and I dropped my pen cap. It was never, oh my god, what am I doing? It was never addressed in Volume 2, and I think that it's relatively important. I mean, that van scene took, 10 hours to film, and we're not seeing the painting again, ever? You're the heart, none of that meant anything then? It has to come back up. And that kind of leads me to a separate off-topic point of Mike and Will need to have a one-on-one discussion. Even if Mike rejects him fully, complete, because, the coming out scene, that's a whole different thing. I will talk about later, because if I keep going off track, then I'm going to forget what I'm talking about. Mike and Will need to have a one-on-one conversation. They need to talk to each other about everything throughout the year, and Mike needs to low-key apologize for being a jerk if he's not actually in love with Will, for saying those things in Season 3 in the rain fight, and, all that. And in this one-on-one conversation, they need to mention the painting in some way or another. And it's relatively important to the show and to the plot and to these characters, and especially to them. Having Will just get over Mike in a second from that coming out scene doesn't make sense. So I'm going to wrap up saying about they have to have a one-on-one. I feel like I can add more to that, but I feel like we see the reason. It makes sense. Going back to the coming out scene, a lot of people didn't like it, and I get why they don't. And personally, I don't know how much I can have a strong opinion on it, because I don't really know. I'm just kind of confused about it in general. People say it's forced, which it is. Vecna forced him to come out to everyone because no more secrets, which he needed to, though. Will needed to come out to them. The whole group thing was odd. I wish it was just with Joyce and Mike. But anyway, it was a little odd that he had to come out to all of them, but he needed to do it. But anyway, that's not what's really important about how good or bad the scene was. Noah's acting was great. What I'm going to focus on is how he was saying Mike was just a crush and that he was just his Tammy. At first, I was like, oh, we're done. But honestly, I think Will has always been an unreliable narrator. He thinks that he's not worthy of love, and he just assumes that the feelings aren't back and forth. And saying he was just a Tammy, he's just saying that so Vecna doesn't use it more further against him. So just convincing himself he's over it is a way of coping because he knows Mike will never like him. Because that's what he thinks. I mean, we see Mike's face in those coming out scenes, and I think the facial expressions say a lot. When Will says, I don't like girls, Mike sits up and, like, looks at him, and then his eyes, like, you know what I mean? Like, rewatch the scene a few times. I think it's important. And another point I want to say is when Will says, I don't like girls, not how you guys do, another creator noticed that the camera pans to Max, or, oh my gosh, to Lucas and Dustin mainly focused, while Mike slightly out of the screen and blurred. Not like you guys too, and then it pans to the two people that have healthy relationships with, Susie and Max. And honestly, the Duffers aren't that stupid. I really don't think they're doing that just to show their faces. The panning to Mike in that scene was really important. And why would they focus on Mike if, they weren't gonna have something about it later? I just dropped my pen. Hold on, my charger just fell out, and this is a mess, but I'm really trying here, okay? I'm only on the first point, I feel like. Anyways. For Mike to make those facial expressions and them not do anything about it after just makes no sense to me, and I feel like that's just stupid. Anyways, I don't really know what I was saying, and I don't want to restart this video for the 10th time again, so we're gonna move on. The second point that Lesbian Mind Flayer made was why is Mike so closed off? In Volume 2, we barely saw any of his feelings. We need his point of view to see how he feels about Will. I mean, that kind of drags on to another point, is that Eleven and Mike have had nothing really romantic this whole season. And honestly, since season 4, since season 3, even when Elle kissed him and he made that shocked face and he didn't even close his eye during the kiss. They've not been romantic, and Mike literally said, friends don't lie to her. And it's like, I don't know. They haven't had anything that romantic. They've had scenes where they hug each other when they reunite, but that's been with every character. Even, like, Dustin and Mike had a hug similar to them. That honestly looks like more chemistry than Mike and Eleven, but, we need to see more of Mike's emotions, is what I'm saying. We don't see his point of view. We don't see how he really feels about this, and he was honestly so close off this volume, which is another issue, I feel like. And seeing his point of view in the 3rd volume will be a contributing factor of making BYLER canon. I feel like it can't just be with Will. Will is already I feel like he's given up on it, and I feel like if they want to make it canon, it has to be Mike initiating this, or them having a one-on-one. Anyway, the third comment I didn't know, and I don't know that much about it, this is just a point someone else made, is that Mike listens and really likes the Butthole Surfers, which is a crude term for homosexuals, as Lesbian Mind Flayer says. And I did not know this. I don't know how accurate that is. I'm sure it is accurate. I don't think someone would just make that up. But that's important. The fact that he's just really, he's like, no, I love this song or something like that. That's just worth mentioning, I feel like. Anyways, another point is that Will always assumes love is unreciprocated. I think that's the right word. Or unrecruited. Or I don't know, sorry. I can't with my words today, but. And he's always been that way. He's always thought about that, like that he just wasn't worthy of love. And, he's an unreliable narrator, so it just doesn't make sense for him to just have this whole self-acceptance arc and then just he accepts himself and then he moves on from Mike in like a second. No, that doesn't make sense. That means that they have to add more to that. He doesn't just move on after 10 years of loving Mike. He loves Mike, and just calling it a crush in his Tammy, it just doesn't make sense. And him saying that Mike was his Tammy or that it was just a crush, he's just saying that. That doesn't mean it's true, because, if a character says something, that doesn't always mean it's true. Like, we hear Steve say, oh, Nancy, she's just a friend, when we know that Steve does still love Nancy, and that's similar, that's also just another parallel of Mike saying that in season 4, we're friends, we're just friends. It just, for Will saying, oh, he's just my Tammy, and always thinking the love is unreciprocated, it's just because he thinks that does not mean it's true. And we know Mike is not Will's Tammy. Tammy was a hallway crush, or whatever people say, and Robin and Tammy didn't even talk. It doesn't make sense for Mike to be compared to that at all. And we know Mike has been compared with Vicky many times, especially, I know there's a screenshot, I don't know if I'm gonna edit this or not, of just so many parallels in season 4 of Mike and Vicky and Robin and Will, and it's just insane that they would do that and then just throw it all away and make us look for these hints. I've rewatched and looked for just hints specifically. I've rewatched this season so many times, and just it doesn't make sense why they would do that and just move on. So that was supposed to be point 4 of Will assuming the love is unreciprocated, which I think, just to say, is that what he says isn't always going to be true. And I feel like if that's how they're going to go, I think it would make sense for BYLER to be canon, because we need to see from Mike. We need to see what Mike thinks of this. We need them to talk. I'm just always going back to the same point, but you know what I'm trying to say. This 5th point I already kind of talked about is that Maleven is Bones. They are not showing any romance at all, and Mike says friends don't lie, when we know when they only say that when they're friends, and Max even says, like, well, boyfriends lie, why wouldn't they do that? And also another point is that Kali says, so this is the famous Mike, not, oh, you're Eleven's boyfriend. No, she doesn't say that. So they haven't kissed once. And yes, I know it's a stressful time, but we've seen Hopper and Joyce kiss each other's, like, hands, or even Lucas and Max, like, showing, like, just crying for each other. We haven't seen anything from Mike and Eleven being that romantic. Okay, point 6 is that Mike and Will have had every single signal that Robin has said. Like, brush of the knee, bump of the shared look. It's like, and the Duffers even said, like, you have to pay attention to the details. That is a really major detail that we can't just ignore. Why would they have all these signals just for it not to work in the end? That does not make sense. It's hard to expand on that, because I feel like it's really self-explanatory. It's like, why would they have all these things and just for it to not work out? I don't know. In this point, I didn't really know till I watched Rant, is that one of the Duffers' favorite ships is, I'm going to butcher this name so bad, Korasami? I don't know. It's from, I think, Avatar, and it's a lesbian ship that got together in the final episode. And I think this tweet is from, they said this in a tweet from, like, a few years ago, but I could see them, if they're really inspired by this, I could see them doing something like it for Mike and Will. And I just feel like that's a point to point out, and especially for being a lesbian ship getting together in the last episode. I think that's relevant. And then Lesbian Mind Flayer, which is an account, by the way, ended with this quote saying, maybe I'm a mess, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm out of my mind. I think that's from Joyce, but I don't know. And then I think this one's from Lucas. I don't believe in coincidences. Especially with the signals, that none of this can be a coincidence unless they're just genuinely queer baiting, which I've heard a lot of people throw around that term. I just don't want to believe they would do that for this being a show about outcasts. Why would there not be outcasts in a show about outcasts? And for them ending the series with BYLER would be so inspiring, empowering, and would leave such an impact, and would honestly just show people, like, the show isn't focused on characters being gay. Like, it's not always been, like, about, like, Will having to come out through every single, it's not been always focused on that. It just, the fact that they'd be able to end with that would be really inspiring for it being such a popular TV show. And I know it would upset a lot of people, but you can't please everyone, and I know that could go for both ways. But for it being a show about people being discriminated in a bunch of different ways, ending it off with Maleven or just, like, Will, like, dead would just be horrible. Will has gone through so much, and for him just to be rejected and just have this whole self-acceptance arc as being one of the only other queer characters on the show, it would just be horrible. And I feel like Will is deserving of love in the end. And that does not mean an epilogue boyfriend. I know people have been saying, like, oh, that could be good for him, or they actually have been saying the opposite. I've seen, honestly, both. But no, I would rather Will end up single and him and Mike have talked it out than him having some random guy just be his boyfriend at the end. That does not make sense. Okay, that's all my points I had written down from other people. I want to point out a point that I've never seen anyone else say, is when, Will is still asking Robin about, in volume 2, about her acceptance and how she got with Vicky. So why would Will still be asking if it wasn't still possible? I mean, they could have wrapped this up volume 1, or even season 4 they could have. But him asking, like, after you accepted yourself, is that how you got with Vicky? And she's like, no, that's not how I got with Vicky. She accepted herself first, and then she told someone, and that's how she got with Vicky, which I think is really important. So Will has been following these steps, I see people saying, as a guide. Robin's been a guide to Will. So first he's accepted himself, like twice, I feel like, at this point, which it's kind of, you know, getting repetitive of how many times he's like, I can't do it, and then he accepts himself. It's like, all right, I think he's accepted himself, and now he's told everybody. And so the next step would be getting with your love, which the only thing that kind of like throws me off from that is that Mike being compared to Tammy, which I feel like we've already disclosed that it's just not true. Vicky's been compared with Mike so many more times than Tammy. We don't even know Tammy. We barely even know what she looks like. We saw her in that one clip. But him following these steps and him only finishing the second step means that there's more. He wouldn't be asking, and she wouldn't have these steps without it having some sort of impact. Sorry, my family's downstairs. So yeah, that's a point I haven't seen. So he's been following the steps. He's on step 2, and he just needs to get to that step 3 of being able to get with Mike. I feel like that's all. I know I'm gonna think of something. Maybe I'll do a part 2. This is like unedited. I was gonna put up pictures and like visuals. I don't have time for that. And I'm gonna go reread the Power Outage fanfic at this point. And if it doesn't end with BYLER, if it doesn't end with BYLER, I'll be disappointed. But if they end it in a way where Mike and Will are able to like rekindle that friendship, because honestly they have had barely any scenes together, I'd be okay with that. But if BYLER doesn't happen, I'm gonna be so disappointed, and I'm gonna have to read some more fanfics, I guess that's who I'm becoming. But anyway, thank you for listening to my rant. I know this doesn't make sense, and I know this is too long, and I know I left points out, and I know this isn't edited, but that's just how it's gonna be. Thank you for watching.